Hello, third block, and this is the second segment of your reading homework due on April 17th. So we are on the top of page 75. I'm actually going to start from the last part of page 74, but we're going to start on page 75. There was water to be carried, too, and firewood for the stove, and these were the jobs the cook didn't like much either, so he found Zex to do them instead for extra helpings at others' expense. What did it matter to him? Okay, again, guys, right? So you're seeing more bribery going on. Then there was a rule that food must be eaten in the canteen, but the bowls couldn't be left there overnight. They'd have been swiped by civilians, so about 50, not more, had to be brought in and quickly washed after use and turned over to the next diners. An extra helping for the man who carried the bowls. To make sure that no one took food from the canteen, a man had to be posted at the door, but however careful he might be, people took them just the same, either by distracting his attention or talking him into it. So someone else had to go over the whole site to collect the dirty bowls and bring them back to the kitchen. And he got an extra helping, and many others got one too. All the cook himself did was this. He poured the grits into a pot. Adding salt, he divided the fat between the pot and himself. Good fat didn't reach the Zex, and the rancid all went into the soup kettle. So when there was an issue of rancid fat from the warehouse, the Zex welcomed it as an extra. Another thing he did, he stirred the kasha when it was boiling. The sanitation inspector had even less to do. He sat and watched. But when the oatmeal was ready, he got his helping as much as his belly would hold. And the cook, too. Then the duty squad leader arrived. The squad was changed every day to have a taste and decide whether the stuff was good enough for the workers. He received a double portion. The whistle sounded again. The squad leaders at once lined up, and the cook handed them bowls through the serving window. In the bottom of the bowls lay some oatmeal. How much, you didn't ask or try to judge by the weight. All you got if you opened your mouth was a bunch of swear words. The steppe was barren and windswept, with a dry wind in the summer and a freezing one in winter. Nothing could ever grow in that steppe, less than nothing behind 4 barriers of barbed wire. Bread comes only from the bread cutter. Oats are threshed only in the warehouse. And however much blood you sweat at work, however much you grovel on your belly, you'll force no food out of the earth. You'll get no more than the damned authorities give you. And you don't even get that because of the cook and the help and all the other trustees and soft jobs. They rob you here in camp, they rob you even earlier in the warehouse. And those who do the robbing don't swing picks, but you swing a pip and take what they give you and get away from the serving window. Pavel and Shukov with Kopchik bringing up the rear walked into the canteen. The men stood there so close to one another that you couldn't see either tables or benches. Some ate sitting down, but most stood. The men of the 82nd, who'd been digging those holes half a day without a chance of getting warm, had been the first to get in after the whistle. Now, even after they'd finished eating, they didn't leave. Where else could they warm up? The swearing fell off them like water off a duck's back. It was so much more comfortable here than in the cold. Pavel and Shukov elbowed their way in. They arrived at a good moment. One squad was being served, another was waiting its turn, and there was only one deputy squad leader near the window. So they were well ahead of the rest. Bowls, bowls, said the cook shouted through the window, and people hurriedly handed them over. Shukov was collecting another lot and turning them in, not to get extra oatmeal, but to get what was coming to him quicker. Behind the partition, some helpers were already washing bowls for extra oatmeal. The cook began to serve the deputy squad leaders, who stood ahead of Pavlo in line. Kopchik, Pavlo shouted over the heads of the men behind him. Here I am, came Kopchik's thin goat-like bleat from the door. Call the squad. Off he went. The main thing today was that the oatmeal was good, real oatmeal, the best sort. It wasn't often they had it, more often they got magara twice a day. But real oatmeal is filling, it's good. How often had Shukov in his youth fed oats to horses? Never had it occurred to him that there would come a time when his whole soul would yearn for a handful of them. Bulls, bulls, shouted the cook. Now the 104th was in line. That squad's leader's deputy up ahead got his double helping and bounced away from the window. This extra helping, too, was at the Zek's expense, but no one objected. The cook gave double helpings to all the squad leaders, and they either ate the extra helping themselves or gave it to their deputies. Tyrion gave his to Pablo. Shukov's job now was to wedge himself in behind a table, oust 2 loafers, politely ask another prisoner to move, and clear a little space in front of him for 12 bowls to stand close together, with a second row of 6 and 2 more on top. Next, he had to take the bowls from Pablo, repeating the number as he did so and keeping his eyes peeled in case some outsider should grab a bowl from the table. All he had to see he wasn't bumped by someone's elbow so as to upset a bowl right beside him, People were leaving the table, stepping over the benches, or squeezing in to eat. Yes, you had to keep your eyes peeled. Was that fellow eating out of his own bowl? Or had he wormed his way to one of the 104ths? 2, 4, 6, the cook counted out the window. He handed out the bowls 2 at a time. It was easier for him that way, otherwise he might count wrong. 2, 4, 6, Pablo repeated quietly to himself there at the window, in Ukrainian, and at once gave the bowls in pairs to Shukov, who put them on the table. Shukov didn't repeat the numbers aloud, but he counted more sharply than anyone. 8, 10. Why wasn't Kopchik bringing in the squad? 12, 14, the counting continued. The kitchen ran out of bowls. Shukov had a clear view through the window past Pablo's head and shoulders. The cook put 2 bowls down on the counter, and keeping his hands on them, paused as though thinking, must be bawling out the dishwashers. But just then, another bunch of dirty bowls was pushed onto the counter. The cook let go of the 2 clean ones he'd filled and pushed back the pile of dirty ones. Shukov left the 14 bowls he had already stacked on the table, straddled a bench, took the 2 filled ones from the counter, and said quietly to Pablo rather than the cook, 14. Stop. Where are you taking those bowls? Shouted the cook. He's from our squad, Pablo confirmed. Our squad, but he's mixed up the count. 14, Pablo said with a shrug. Himself, he wouldn't have swiped the extra bowls, for as deputy squad leader, he had to maintain his dignity. But now he was simply repeating what Shukov had said. He could always blame him for the mistake. I've already counted 14, the cook expostulated. So you did, but you didn't pass them out. You kept your hands on them, Shukov shouted. Come and count for yourself if you don't believe us. Look, they're all here on the table. As he spoke, he had noticed 2 Estonians pushing through to him, and he shoved the 2 bowls into their hands as they passed. And he had managed to get back to the table to see that all the bowls were in place. The next table hadn't swiped any, though they had plenty of opportunity to do so. Okay, guys. So, I don't know if you picked up on that, but basically what just happened was, Shukov's, their group, right? Shukov's group basically swiped some extra bowls in order to get more food. Okay, so the squad, Shukov squad, basically just stole some extra bowls to get more food. So they did this underhandedly and then lied about it. All right, so that's just what happened there. Let's keep going. The cook's red face loomed large in the window. Where are those bowls? He asked sternly. Here they are, at your service, yelled Shukov. Move along, scum. You're spoiling his view, he said to someone giving him a shove. Here they are, the pair of them. He picked up 2 bowls from the second row. Here we have 3 rows of 4, all nice and neat. Count them. Hasn't your squad come? The cook asked, looking suspiciously around the small segment of the canteen he could see through the window. It had been kept narrow to prevent anyone looking into the kitchen and seeing how much was left in the kettle. No, none of them are here yet, said Pablo, shaking his head. Then why the hell are you taking the bowls when the squad's not here? Here they come, yelled Shukov, and everyone heard the peremptory shouts of the captain at the door. Why are you hanging around here? He yelled in his best quarterdeck voice. If you've eaten, beat it and let others in. The cook muttered something through the serving window. Then he drew himself up, and his hands could again be seen giving out the bowls. 16, 18. Then he ladled the last portion, a double helping. 23. That's all. Next squad. The men of the 104th pushed through. Pablo handed them bowls, passing them over the heads of the prisoners sitting at the second table. In summer, 5 could have sat on a bench, but now, as everyone was wearing thick clothes, 4 could barely fit in, and even they found it awkward to move their spoons. Figuring that of the 2 bowls of oatmeal that had been swiped, 1 at least would be his, Shukov lost no time in applying himself to the first bowl. He drew his right knee up to his stomach and pulled his spoon, Ust Izma, 1944, from his boot top, removed his hat, put it in the left of his armpit, and ran his spoon under the edge of the kasha. This is the moment that demands concentration as you remove some of the scanty kasha from the bottom of the bowl, put it carefully into your mouth, and swirl it around there with your tongue. But Shukov had to hurry to show Pablo he had already finished and was waiting to be offered a second bowl. And there was Fitikov to be dealt with. He had come into the canteen with the 2 Estonians and had witnessed the whole affair of the 2 extra bowls. Now he stood there, straight in front of Pablo, eyeing the 4 undistributed helpings, as if to say that he ought to be given at least a half a helping too. Young swarthy Pablo, however, went calmly on with his double portion, and there was no way of telling whether he noticed anyone standing there or even remembered those extra bowls at all. Shukov finished his kasha. He had promised his belly 2 helpings, so 1 wasn't enough now to give him the full feeling he normally got from the real oatmeal kasha. He groped in his inside pocket for the scrap of clean rag, found the unfrozen crescent of crust, meticulously used it to wipe off the last remnant of mush from the bottom of the bowl and any that still clung to the brim. Then he licked the crust clean, then repeated the whole process. The bowl looked now as if it had been washed with a dull film, nothing more on the inside surface. He handed it over his shoulder to one of the dish collectors and sat on without replacing his hat. Though it was Shukov who had swindled the extra bowls, it was for Pablo to distribute them. Pablo prolonged the agony a little longer while emptying his own bowl. He didn't lick it clean, he merely gave a lick to a spoon, tucked it away, and crossed himself. And then very lightly he touched. There wasn't room to move 2 of the remaining 4 bowls. It meant he was giving them to Shukov. Ivan Denisovich, take one for yourself and give the other to Cesar. Shukov knew one of the bowls had to be taken to the office of Cesar, who would never lower himself by going to the canteen or, for that matter, to the mess hall in camp. He knew it, but all the same, when Pablo touched the bowls, his heart contracted. Could Pablo be giving him both? And now, as Pablo spoke, his heartbeat went back to normal. Without losing any time, he leaned over his lawful spoil and began to eat with deliberation, insensitive to the thumps on his back that the Zeks on the next squad were dealing him. The only thing that vexed him was that the second bowl might still go to Fetikov. Fetikov was a master at cadging, but he lacked the courage to swipe anything. Nearby sat Captain Bunovsky. He had long finished his kasha. He didn't know the squad had 2 extra portions to dispose of. He didn't look around to see how much Pablo still had left to hand out. He was simply relaxing, warming up. He was not strong enough to rise to his feet and to go out into the cold or into that icy warming up spot. He, like the very people he had just hounded out of the canteen with his rasping voice, was occupying a place he had no right to and getting in the way of the next squad. He was a newcomer. He was unused to the hard life of the Zeks. Though he didn't know it, moments like this were particularly important to him, for they were transforming him from an eager, confident naval officer with a ringing voice into an inert, through the weary Zek. And only that inertness lay the chance of surviving the 25 years of imprisonment he'd been sentenced to. People were already shouting at him and nudging him in the back to make him give up his place. "Captain," said Pablo. "Hey, Captain." Bunovsky shuddered as though he was being jerked out of a dream. He looked around. Pablo handed him a bowl of kasha. He didn't ask him whether he wanted it. The captain's eyebrows shot up. He looked at the bowl as at something miraculous. Take it," said Pablo reassuringly. Picking up the last bowl for the squad leader, went out. An apologetic smile flitted over the captain's chapped lips, and this man who had sailed around Europe and navigated the great northern route leaned happily over half a ladleful of thin oatmeal kasha, cooked entirely without fat, just oats and water. Fetikov cast angry looks at Shukov and the captain and left the canteen. But Shukov thought Pablo had been right. In time, the captain would learn the ropes. Meanwhile, he didn't know how to live. Shukov still nursed a faint hope that Cesar would give him his bowl of kasha, but it seemed unlikely, for more than 2 weeks had passed since Cesar had received his last package. After scraping the bottom and rim of the second bowl in the same way as the first and licking the crust, Shukov finally ate the crust itself. Then he picked up Cesar's bowl of cold kasha and went out. "It's for the office," he said as he pushed past the man at the door who tried to stop him taking the bowl out. The office was in a log cabin near the sentry house. As in the morning, smoke was curling out of the chimney. The stove was kept going by an orderly who worked as an errand boy too, picking up a few kopecks here and there. They didn't begrudge him shavings or even logs for the office. The outer door creaked as Shukov opened it. All right, guys, that's the end of my second segment. There are 3 more to go. Just a reminder, you need 3 annotations. Follow the same format in the reading guide notes. God bless you.